When we are able to set limits in our lives and respect them ourselves, this does not make us egocentric human beings. Instead, it opens the door to our development and well being because limits are one of the most useful tools that we all have and that we all can use and apply in our lives. Welcome to Clichés Reinvented, Reinventing Life's Clichés, a space where I'm going to share information, thoughts, and insights to help us both live a life in consciousness. These are reflections that have helped me with my personal growth and to live happier and more conscious. This is why now I want to share them with you. I want to thank you for being here today and taking the time to listen to this podcast while you're walking in your car, walking your dog, on the way to work, to study, whatever. Whatever you're doing, thank you for being here with me and with yourself. Limits. We live in a society full of exceeded limits. What do I mean by this? Well, today there are very few people who respect the limits of society, the limits between people and the limits within themselves. At the same time, there are very few who know and set their own limits. It is for this very reason that we see the world and our life as an absolute chaos, a complete disorder and full of problems practically everywhere. Coming to Germany, here mini story time, a country with so many norms and rules that are followed most of the time, at least in comparison to my country, to Colombia, where there may be rules, but these are very rarely respected and followed. I have realized here how it is possible to live in peace, in calmness, without being constantly worried, thinking that someone will come at me and steal my things, or that something bad is going to happen, or with this chaos everywhere, as it certainly happens in some of our cities. And just as you can see the respect towards the rules reflected on society itself in more developed countries, for example, in the direct positive effect of the social, economic, and technological development, you can also see the respect for the limits within a person reflected in their own life when the person has set their limits and has respected them. For the record, I'm not saying that everything is perfect in these countries or in Germany, because nothing really is, like anywhere here in this planet. Everything is a process, and just as each person has its own process and things to learn, society itself as a whole and the different countries, regardless of their quality of life and economic growth, have things to improve. Although, yes, I'm not gonna lie to you, things look way much better in many different aspects. Each country is at a different level as well as people. So, just as you can live better in a more developed country, we can also live better in our own life, respecting our own limits. Respecting our own limits is not, let's say, a deprivation of any kind of freedom. The problem is that we have misunderstood freedom with I do and say whatever I want, even if I harm or cause damage to others or even to myself. However, when we understand that having the freedom to do what we want lies on having complete knowledge about what is simply right and what is simply wrong, depending on the consequences that this brings to our lives, and make a decision based on this, our whole world changes. We have always heard or seen that they say, set limits in your life, do this, do that, but they have never told us how to do it. Or in the case that they have not warned us about how difficult it can be if we don't start at the root of the need to apply limits in our lives. And most of the time, they don't teach us this because setting limits in our lives is an activity that is directly related to our personal and spiritual growth and self esteem. Setting limits is simply something that must be done in order to continue growing and developing in this world full of crazy people, all of us included. Because, oh, surprise, the limits are not only for the people around us, but also for ourselves. Because sometimes we ourselves behave like irrational beings. This is the point where we have to remember that we have limits that we must respect, and if we want to become what we once thought and told to ourselves that we wanted to be. However, starting at the beginning, what are limits? Well, this is a really broad question that we might ask ourselves, but I'm not going to answer it directly. Instead, I'm going to talk about the different types of limits in this world of personal growth. So, there are the limits of behaviors and activities that we carry out ourselves and within ourselves. It is when we already know that what we are doing is not healthy, nor it is right or okay, and especially the rate at which we are doing it. This means how often we are doing several things that are not having a positive impact in our life. Here, I mean, when the balance is lost and we are reaching extremes, causing a, an imbalance in our life, which in no case turns out to be healthy. So, for example, procrastination, unhealthy eating habits, drinking, smoking, doing drugs, also disrespecting others, having bad attitudes, having a bad behavior, basically all bad habits, all these are aspects that when we realize that we are doing them and that they are not bringing anything positive nor good into our life, this kind of eye opening is showing us that we should stop. That's it. On the other hand, the limits that we impose on society and other people, these are limits that we do not allow other people to exceed with respect to ourselves. Because either we like it or not, we all live in a crazy society where it has not been understood nor internalized that there are many aspects of a person's life that must be respected, such as their time, their physical and mental integrity, their peace, their tranquility, their calmness, their security, their well being. And if we are already aware of some of them, then it is good to make them be respected. The two types of limits mentioned before have one thing in common, and is that they all begin with the respect for ourselves. It happens that even though we have heard about personal limits, we come to see and notice their importance when they have already been, let's say, surpassed or broken, when we already messed it up, or we have already allowed other people to mess it up against us. A clear example of this is when someone disrespects us on our face, or when we end up in an uncomfortable situation which we were not able to reject from the beginning. Or even, well, this might be a little long term situation, but still is worth mentioning when we are already at the hospital connected to a machine due to bad habits from the ones which we were never able to distance from. However, if this is known that the fact of not respecting or enforcing our limits brings negative consequences to our lives, because remember, we need to remember that the simple fact that we do not feel good or okay is already a negative consequence that should not be ignored. Like, it's not normal to be sad all the time. It's not normal to feel bad or feel depressed the whole time. Like, this is not how things are supposed to be. So, if this is already known, why is it so difficult to set limits for ourselves and for others? Certainly, we will not obtain the correct answer to this question or the complete answer because it is something that depends on each human being that cannot be the same for everyone. And it can also change over time. Still, we can what I can say about this, it is that sometimes it is so difficult to set limits in our lives because we still do not know who we are. We don't know our worth. We don't know what is important to us, such as the time we spend by ourselves, or quality time, or our peace, nor do we know what we like and what we don't, or we have not given it the importance and recognition that this type of personal aspects really deserve, nor have we understood and internalized them in our lives and in our day to day. Because if we did, we would act in like, let's say, affinity or coherence with them, and likewise we would obtain the expected results, which are definitely not a sad and depressed and terrible life. I'm going to be honest with you. So, before graduating from high school, another story time, I had not taken like into account the power that limits have in a person's life. Even though like in some cases I did apply them unconsciously many times. So I don't know, when I wanted time by myself and I didn't go with someone or I say no to things. So like I kind of knew about them, but not that much really. However, there were many other cases in which I didn't even apply any type of limits, and I had no idea of the great damage I was doing to myself until everything reached like its own limit. Like I was just living for others, letting others, let's say, do my life, or I was thinking like, yeah, I'm living for the rest, like not for me. And at the end, I was leaving myself behind and accepting to do things like I didn't really want it to, but at the end I did it, and this was just like messing me up like terribly. And so being able to start from scratch in a new country where no one knew me, start a new life with no past burdens, a new beginning, I will not lie that it opened the door to this great opportunity to be myself. Because whether we like it or not, in an environment where everyone already knows about our past, our mistakes, in an environment where everything stays the same, where there is no room for change and development, or we just don't talk about this type of stuff openly, it can be certainly much more difficult to make a change. However, I say difficult but not impossible. And each situation brings its pros and cons. And here I speak from what I have experienced, which is not like the experience of everyone. So, already like being here in Germany, I decided to start painting my life as I wanted to, as I liked it, and like in internal and external aspects. But it has happened to me in several occasions that I start to feel good about myself. Like everything inside of me is working, it's following its flow, like it's good. But I go and interact with people, with the world, and it's like, damn no, like I don't like this. And let's say I can give an example of this, like with my time, going to places where I don't feel comfortable because of whatever, and I end up wasting my time because I don't end up having a good time, or I end up doing activities that at the end of the day I'm going to feel bad about. So this is when I knew I had to start setting limits, putting myself as a priority. And some of the times it has been unconsciously, but many others more recently have been perfectly conscious. Because you begin to know what you want and what you don't. And at this point, it is always good to remember that the others are a mirror of ourselves. We may not have this, let's say, same attitude with the same person or in the same situation and environment, but it may be that we have similar attitude in other areas of our lives, with ourselves or with other people or in other situations. Sometimes this can be a little difficult to understand, and I think I might have talked already about it on another episode. But so for example, I give an example about it. Um, I'm not liking how this person is treating me. She's disrespecting me. She's my friend, but she's always like having rude attitude towards me. And I'm like, bro, no, I don't like it. So first of all, we must see within ourselves what we are doing. Maybe we have not been conscious about, but we might have this same attitude with our mom or with our dad, and we're doing exactly the same thing with them, and we have not been conscious about, but now these people is treating me like that, and I'm like, oh no, I don't like it. But then you see, and you're always the same with these other people. Or maybe with yourself, you're always treating you as trash, you don't like yourself, you turn your dreams down, you like treat yourself bad. And then this is what you're receiving from others. So you see, is this kind of first look within yourself, think, realize, reflect on what might you do like with others, and then you will be okay, this makes sense. And actually it always happens to me. I'm starting like not to like something about others, and then I'm like, I talk to my mom, she's like my therapist, and I'm like, I don't really like this about this person, I hate this situation and whatever. And then it's like, have you noticed like something about it, like you might be doing the same thing? And recently, the same thing, it has been like with my parents. Yeah. So then when you realize it, like, then you say, okay, I need to certainly change this because it's not okay. So, despite of the fact that we used limits towards other people, we must reflect on why this uncomfortable situation came into our life. Because, I mean, let's just not lie to each other. When limits are exceeded or we have to set our limits, it is simply an uncomfortable and sometimes difficult situation. When it comes to setting, like the setting of limits towards others, it can be in terms of partner, friends, family, acquaintances. Like, it's important to start with the respect for the other person. When you're going to talk things out, because we cannot wait for the others to respect our limits if we're not first respecting the person, regardless of whether they have already disrespected us, whatever. Like, I know that it can be difficult to like understand, assimilate the fact of treating a person who has not treated us well at all. But I mean, this is the only way to cut this chain of hatred and disrespect, leaving the ego aside and being more humble, because the reward that comes behind this act of humility and love is just impressive. Each of us must test it to see and experience all the fruits it brings to our lives. So, from my experience, I can really tell you, let's say for the past half a year and yeah, like 2 years that I've applied this, being more respectful, more loving, more caring for me and for others, especially for me. This has bring me like amazing results because I just don't end up in like situations with rude people. Usually people are not mean towards me, are not rude towards me. They usually don't like cause or harm me, like not every time. Of course there might be situations in which I struggle with people and with little things, but like as soon as I realize that I'm struggling with someone else, I like come back to me. And as I told you before, I'm like, talk to my mom, talk to myself, and it's like, okay, and talk to God as well. And it's like, okay, like what am I doing not right and why this is happening? Like with every single little thing that it's just not making me feel okay, I come back to myself. And as you see, and as I've seen in my life, and you should see it in your life too, you will see step by step how difficult situations or rude people or mean people just don't don't get into your life. Like they like it just decreases this amount of struggles, let's say. Or if they appear, like you just come back to yourself and solve them. And I repeat, we do not have to sound rude or egocentric when we are setting our limits. It is only to let that person know what we do not like or what we do not agree with and take action so that this does not continue to happen. But sometimes we also have to do our part. And here comes the fact of saying no, because there are many people who just don't listen, and it's like nothing has happened. It's just putting like a stop on a situation or a person who already is exceeding the limits of respect towards us, or saying no and go away from the situation when we already know in what it'll end up. Because just let's be honest, with some people and situations, you already know what it will end up in. It could be wasting our time, end up being disrespected, or forced to do things we don't really want. And here again, many may say, well, if you don't want to, just don't do it, and that's it. Well, I was one of those, but then when it happens to you, you realize it's not that easy to say no. When, first of all, no personal or internal work has been done, and second, you have quite influential people around you. In Spanish, there's a saying that says, sometimes it's better to prevent than to regret. It's cool. On the other hand, when the limits are with ourselves, let's say the limit with the use of our phone, of social media, the limit with procrastination, in this moment is when we must remember why we need to respect these limits. Why, in first place, we decided to apply them on our lives. For example, on our life. For example, it can be because we want to be someone for whom this type of activities don't help at all. We can even set a limit for negativity, negative thoughts. Let's say that we begin to complain about everything unconsciously, but when we are already aware of what we are doing, one of the ways to proceed is to say like, okay, enough, and take our thoughts to other things, affirmations, manifestations, whatever. But just say, okay, that's enough with it. As another example, we can also set limits with the news or with a lot of the garbage we consume on the internet. For example, we can say to ourselves, okay, I watch half an hour of news, social media, whatever. I get informed, I distract myself, but that's enough. And just enough. I'm not going to continue to fill up my head with useless information or everything terrible that happens around the world, because this will not bring me peace. And then I'll be stressed because I know myself. So, it's just like this internal talk you have to have within you and just see what works for you and what doesn't. The most important thing is to be able to identify and address this type of behavior or attitude that we know is not doing us any good, or it is not having a positive impact in ourselves and in our life, and then take action to change it. A great tool that I can really suggest to all of you regarding this topic is the book Atomic Habits. It's an excellent book full of tools and reflections to achieve the changes we want in our lives. Because it sounds crazy, but it is not. And it never hurts to help yourself a little bit. Also, if it works for us, let's say as a homework, it will be good like to reflect on what we value in life, what gives us peace and what don't. Think about what we like and what we don't, and so on little by little. we'll be building a solid base to continue growing and developing in this world of crazy people with huge, huge potentials, each one of us. It is time to remember that setting limits is not an egocentric act or that you are going against destiny, because one of the most beautiful gifts that we have been given is the power of choice. And we have the freedom to choose and take action. It is also us, the ones who are building our life, and the ones who have full responsibility for it. Any situation that causes us disagreement or discomfort comes to teach us something, and that's something only each one of us knows it. Setting limits do not means running away from reality. Instead, they are a tool that we all have to keep on going with our personal and spiritual growth. Thank you for arriving to the end of this episode. I hope you really enjoy it. You really take out value from it. If you like it, share it or listen it all over again. I really appreciate your time and your attention. Bye. Have a really, really nice day.